Okay.
All right. So, hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in wherever you may be. My name is Dan Williams. I am one of the trainers here at the Mandel Recreation Center, and I get the pleasure today of presenting to you the first in our series of What's What's lectures, where we'll be going over just a series of different health topics, kind of breaking them down, and hopefully debunking them a little bit for you. So today's lecture, the first one, is going to be on salt. So to give a little overview of what we'll be covering today. So we're going to start off just talking briefly about what is salt, just a quick introduction to it. We're going to talk about where it's most common in our diet, and then we're going to finish off by talking about how we can actually reduce that salt intake. So what's the 411? Breaking down salt at a molecular level is sodium and it's chloride. It's 40% sodium. And for a lot of us, it's going to be, salt is the main contributor towards sodium in our diet. So a lot of times you'll hear those two words used interchangeably. That'll be the case during this lecture at times. But for you to keep that in mind, sodium is going to be an important mineral and electrolyte that we all ingest. And the sodium aspect of the salt is important for body functions like regulating blood pressure and helping with electrical transmission through the nerves. So as we take in that salt, it helps send the signals from the brain to the muscles and back and forth to help us contract our muscles, and that includes our heart. So it's pretty important for a couple of different reasons. The current RDA for salt is about 5 grams per day, so that's how much is recommended that we intake on a daily basis, and that equates to about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. This is coming from the Center of Disease Control, but as we'll talk about, this is a little bit of a gray area now. But a lot of times when you hear people talking about reducing their sodium, the first step that they're going towards is to reduce salt, and so that is why. So should we be wary? So salt has kind of gotten a bad rep in recent times, and there's a little bit of a debate in the scientific community. We're not going to get too in depth with what he said, she said about it, and we're going to stick a little bit closer to how we can focus on reducing salt for who might want to do that. But it's important to know most of us don't have to worry about salt. Again, it's gotten kind of a bad rep, but for the vast majority of us, we're going to be okay. The body is able to process salt. It's a natural occurrence in the body, and so for most of us, we're going to be okay. However, as you can see here, we do consume plenty of salt, so getting enough in the diet is certainly not a problem. The average American intake is about 9 grams per day of salt, which is about twice that of the RDA. Again, this is where a little bit of the debate might lie, but going by CDC guidelines for today. So salt isn't inherently dangerous, but we should be aware of what we consume, just like with anything. But older people, older populations should be a little bit more cautious, if anybody. So I have a term here, salt sensitivity, and that's going to differ from person to person, but that really just relates to how well the body can metabolize salt. So how well we take it in, can our body utilize it for the functions that it's supposed to be used for. As we get older, we become a little bit less efficient at utilizing the salt. And so those older populations might be the ones that want to just be more in touch with your doctor. This isn't going to be prescribing to anyone in particular, should you increase or decrease salt. If you think that might be the case for you, I encourage you to be in touch with your doctor. We're going to be looking at very objectively just how you can reduce that intake if that applies to you. So there have been some studies that show links between hypertension, cardiovascular events, and even some cognitive impairments with very high intakes of salt. And this is over chronic time, so that just means over time, if you're consuming large amounts of sodium and large amounts of salt just repeatedly year after year, day after day, then it might start to lead to these potential conditions such as hypertension. But this is where the debate kind of is, causation versus correlation. But at the very least, we know that it is likely to increase blood pressure to some extent. To go in hand with that, there's going to be a number of coexisting factors that go in hand with hypertension, which is what we all think about predominantly when we think about salt. So a lot of those other conditions are going to commingle, and that'll exacerbate those side effects and those conditions that you might have. So smoking, drinking, just poor daily habits, sedentary lifestyle, and stress that we face from things like jobs, from this whole pandemic that we're facing right now, a lot of different factors will contribute to blood pressure, but a high sodium diet does seem to exacerbate that according to the literature. Again, there's a little bit of debate here, but we're going to leave that for another lecture. So where does salt sneak into the diet, right? This is why we're actually here. And there's the myth that goes around that to reduce your sodium intake or your salt intake, the first thing you should do is take the salt off the dinner table. Turns out that although that is true to an extent, the vast majority of the sodium and the salt that we ingest comes from processed foods. So in the restaurant, there's going to be a degree of this as well, but the vast majority is going to be from those inner aisle foods at grocery stores, processed foods, preserved foods. We'll take a look in a moment here at some of the top sources according to the CDC, but we can see from this infographic here about 65% of our daily sodium intake, or just general sodium intake, comes from those processed foods that we get from stores. This attributes about 25% of sodium intake to restaurants, with just the remaining 10% coming from your home table. So, there's going to be multiple inputs, but the vast majority appears to come from those processed and prepackaged foods. There is another source that might be a little bit more important, but a lot of medicines tend to have sodium in them, something you might not expect so much. So acetaminophen, something that we all take in the form of aspirin or Tylenol or many different forms, is actually very high in sodium. So for example, one dose of Tylenol has about 427 milligrams of sodium in it. So if you're taking a couple doses per day, that's very quickly going to add up. So, it's going to come from a majority of different sources, but it's important to just minimize each one as much as we can. So here are some main sources, these are the top 10 sources according to the Center for Disease Control. Some of them might be a little bit more surprising than others. Some of them, unfortunately, as much as we love pizza, that's going to be one of the number one sources. Pizzas, breads, sandwiches are up here, cured meats, right, if they're preserving that salt. Soups, burritos, and tacos, unfortunately, are up there as well. And then some of the less surprising savory snacks, chips, pretzels, cookies, they're going to be loaded in the sodium. There's 3 topics on here that were a little bit surprising even to me from the CDC. They say that chicken, cheese, and eggs are all very high in sodium. So this can be broken down a little bit into where it's coming from, right? Again, if you're buying store-bought chicken, it's likely been preserved with some sort of salt solution, so that's why they say it's high in sodium. But at the same time, if chicken is going to be your high source of sodium, you might be doing okay. So although it says chicken, cheese, and eggs, really we need to focus on these savory snacks, cured meats, pizza, some of the more obvious solutions. So how to manage salt? So it's going to be a multifactorial approach. Of course, there's not just one Band-Aid to fix the salt problem that we say we have, but the most important thing to do here is to practice conscious shopping. So every bit of food that you take from a store is going to have a nutrition label. It's going to look something like this. That'll have the percent recommended daily allowances on it, and you can see here this is an example from a DiGiorno's pizza box, and it has 670 milligrams of sodium in it. You can see it right in here, and that's about 29% of the daily value. Unfortunately, that's about 1/6 of the pizza, so if you were to have a couple of servings of the pizza, that sodium is going to add up very quick. Regardless, any food that you get from a store is going to have a label like this on it, so you can read that as you're shopping and be aware of how much sodium is in each bit of food that you're purchasing. So look for those low sodium options, read the labels, be aware. When you're eating out, you can also ask for low sodium options, right? A lot of those restaurants are going to be throwing a bunch of salt on for flavor in the kitchen, so you can ask just reduce the salt a little bit for your dish when you're eating out. That might be a little bit easier now with the pandemic and not eating out as much, but even still when you're going out, you can explore those other alternatives. At home, use different spices, explore. There's a lot of different options. Salt is a little bit overrated in my personal opinion. There's so many other flavors that are out there. We'll take a look at some of them in just a moment here. But so many other ways that you can enrich your dish, and a lot of them that you can even grow right at home. So very simple and tasty methods to substitute for salt. Speak with your doctor. Again, this is just for those that maybe you're taking a lot of medicine on a daily basis. Speak with your doctor. Say if sodium is an issue, maybe is there an alternative that we can explore for this. But again, that is more so a conversation that you would have to have directly with your doctor. But just know that there's not going to be one solution to solving this salt, large consumption issue. So you're going to have to look at it from a couple of different perspectives. So those at-home alternatives, so replacing salt at home. Again, I'm just going to go through a couple of these real quick, but these are just suggestions that I pulled from a website, so feel free to experiment. This is really just a short list of what you can use at home. But possibly for some meats, you can try some herbs like rosemary, ginger, oregano, parsley, sage. Some of those, right, are very good. They call them windowsill crops, so you can grow them right there in your kitchen and pick them right off and have fresh leaves right there for your red meat. For seafood and chicken, I might recommend chives, coriander, paprika, or tarragon. So those are some good options. And then for salads and vegetables, you might try some mint, maybe some cinnamon, some thyme, some turmeric. And then there's also, again, this is a short list, so some other options such as chili powder, lemon pepper, cumin, and basil. So there's a lot of options out there. Explore, have fun with it. You can make it a family activity. What are we doing today? How are we going shopping? Let's pick some fun spices off the shelf. Play the rainbow game. Get some different colors off the shelf, right? You can get the red for the chili pepper, yellow for the lemon pepper, green for the mint, and so on and so forth. So have fun with it. By no means are we restricted just to use salt in the kitchen, so why should we? So key takeaways from this lecture, right? First and foremost, don't be afraid of salt. It's not some evil component to all our dishes. We all consume it. So don't be afraid of it, but be aware of how much we're eating. Again, just like anything, you should always be aware of what you're consuming, to what quantities you are, and how that affects you. So have that conversation possibly with a healthcare provider if needed. But again, most of us are probably going to be okay. So you can reduce it by eating out less at restaurants, exploring those low sodium options, and practicing conscious shopping, so reading those nutrition labels. So those are a couple different ways that can help you outside the home. And then inside the home, explore those other alternatives that we just saw. There's a whole host of different herbs and spices. So really explore your palate and have fun with it. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us on the Facebook page. This presentation will be posted up there, and there's also going to be a couple more links here that you can read more yourself, some from the CDC, some from PubMed. So there's a lot of information out there about salt and how salt intake can influence the diet. So I encourage you all to read up and contact us if you have any questions, and I hope that you will be here for our next What's What lecture. Have a great day.